Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, and a warm welcome to this council meeting for Wednesday, 14th of February 2024. Before we get into our order of proceedings, if I could invite the Deputy Mayor, whakarakia, thank you.
Tēnā koe, your worship o te rā, tēnā koutou katoa i ngā rangatira, e ngā kaimā takitaki. Greetings everyone, your worship, councillors, officers and members of the public, tēnā koutou. Tū tawa mai I runga, tū tawa mai I raro, tū tawa mai I roto, tū tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Come from within, below, around the environment, and may we seek vitality and be strengthened in unity. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora. For this meeting, of course, is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. In terms of health and safety, in the unlikely event of an emergency, our fire exits are clearly listed and the entrances you came in and the running person green signs. We would then evacuate to the assembly area, which is the clock tower, Te Maraehine, the square. It is a non-smoking facility, and again, if there is the need for a defibrillator, that is located in the foyer entrance on the ground floor. Any incidences, please report them to the committee administration. Officers, if we could just, and for people online, and there are a few online today, if we could just, your first name and your title in the first instance when you're speaking. We have a number of councillors online for various reasons. We have Councillor Mickelard, Councillor Meehan, Councillor Dennison and Councillor Fitzgerald. And we have, and we'll now move through to apologies. And we have a recommendation to Council that we receive the apologies from Councillor Finlay. I'm happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. No matter, we will vote, please. And that has passed 15 votes for and none against. Right, moving through to other items. There's notification of additional items, there is none. In terms of declarations of interest, I'll declare an interest in item 13 and I'll vacate the chair, and I think the Deputy Mayor will take over on that one. Public comment, I haven't received any public comment. Nothing from around the table. Right, we'll move through to number 6, which is our presentation on recommendations from the 7th of February 2024 meeting around Public Culture and Sport Committee, and I'll ask the Chair to speak to that. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to present for adoption the recommendations of Part 1 Public Culture and Sport Committee meeting on the 7th of February 2024. Reserve my right to speak to that. Thanks.
Great. I'm happy to second that. A bit easier rather than online. Are there any matters arising from that? Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I've actually got some questions that relate to this. because it was referred for the decision to be made at this meeting. So would now be the time to ask those questions?
Yes, yes.
Just in terms of the requested increase from Te Manawa, I was interested in the supporting information in our annual budget, in our long-term plan, that the total expenses for arts, culture and heritage is overall proposed to be increased by 9.4% or 1.175 million. And that's spread out across a number of, there's 5 different activities, Te Manawa being one of them. I'm just wondering if this request could be accommodated within the overall proposed increase for arts, culture and heritage. If we could get perhaps a comment from staff about if that's a way that we could fund the increase without increasing. At the moment, the outcome, if this is supported, is that it would increase the proposed rates increase from the 11.5 to the 11.7. So I'm just trying to see if there is a way of approving the increases within the proposed increases in the overall arts and culture budgets.
Through the chair, while the team are thinking about it, so we did provide a response to your question in relation to that online. I think that the team have outlined that there are a number of other activities and things that are included in that increase amount over and above Te Manawa as well, your decision about whether or not you're wishing to make changes to that overall budget, but other activities will be impacted by any change.
Thank you. Yeah, I did ask a question about one of the budget lines, which was support to arts, culture and heritage groups, which was a 24% increase. The answer that came back included about a 200,000 reallocation of costs from other budgets for that group, and I'm just for that budget. And the reallocation of costs from other budgets is an answer that I've received quite a number of times when I've asked about increases, and I'm just wondering if there is a reallocation of costs from other budgets, is there a corresponding reduction in any other budgets that we would be able to see to support that answer?
I'll just get the team to check, but I'm assuming that we're talking about overhead allocations. Cam?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in this case, the sum that's being discussed has come from the City Library budget, and there has been a decrease in the City Library budget.
Okay. And just in terms of the professional services, contractors and professional services have increased by 200,000. So is that just a transfer as opposed to an actual increase in cost?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm happy to make a comment on this.
Yes, you can. You can. Well, it's. Yes, you can make a comment.
My preference in any sort of request for an increase is first to see if that increase can be accommodated within our existing or proposed budgets, and particularly with the arts, culture and heritage going up by 9.4% across that activity. I don't have a comfort level with increasing that further, which this recommendation would be seeking to do. I won't be supporting this recommendation as it currently reads, but if it fails, perhaps it might be more straightforward to move an amendment. If there was a seconder for an amendment for this cost to be offset through reductions across the arts, culture and heritage, through a smaller increase, so that this increase wouldn't increase rates, I'd seek a seconder to test the room for that as an amendment prior to this being voted on today. I have got the wording of that I can provide if.
There's no support, so.
Okay, so if there's no support to test an amendment in that regard, I'd just like to say that, you know, the budget line for Te Manawa is for 5.2 million and going up to 5.38 million overall budget. And that, I think that's probably the biggest budget line for one activity, one of the biggest lines for one activity in our operational spend. It's a very significant spend. And whilst I support the principle that staff should be remunerated appropriately, and I support, and that is the rationale that Te Manawa have come to us with asking for this request. There are a wide range of expenses that drive the overall costs of Te Manawa that sit outside of remuneration. So my lack of support for this recommendation is not a lack of support from the idea of paying people properly. My lack of support is that I would like to ask Te Manawa to look at their overall expenses across the whole budget, to look at where they can find savings and change either the operating model or aspects to the way that they do business to operate within the grant that has already got a CPI included in it. So that's my rationale for not supporting this today.
I'll just comment and then I'll give the right a reply back to the mover. Look, I think we have to be a little bit careful with some of the numbers that we band around. And yes, on paper, it's gone up 9.4%. In real terms, let's be really honest, why did they come to us? They can't pay their staff. So, look, we're not keeping up. So, yes, I appreciate some councils have very little support for any increases across the board, and that's your prerogative. But absolutely, we do have to meet the rubber has to hit the road at some stage. And frankly, I'm getting a little bit tired of some of this. So, I'm very supportive of pushing ahead with this, and I urge you to as well. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for your support in seconding this motion, which, colleagues, I hope you can find it in yourselves to support this through as we go out for consultation on this rates rise to include this increase to the baseline funding in that consultation process. I just wanted to reflect on the presentation that Te Manawa gave to us last week and be really clear. If they don't receive additional funding, they're looking at continuing to hold vacancies and maybe continue to run with fewer staff. That means additional pressure on existing staff, which increases the likelihood of us losing more staff, and we get into that vicious cycle, and we know how that ends. Councillor Kneller is of course right, and Te Manawa have looked at their budgets to see how else they could accommodate this. They were really clear when they came to speak to us that they can't find a way in their existing budgets to meet the market in terms of pay expectations and to respond to that strategic pay survey. The only other budget they can reduce, if we don't see this one through, the only budget that has any flexibility in it is their exhibitions budget. And exhibitions are their core business. So is that what we want? We want to cut into core business by not agreeing to this at this stage. That would have impact on visitors, it would have impact on opportunities to engage, and impact on opportunities to seek external funding, because nobody funds an exhibition that isn't happening. So we would end up right back here asking for more money into the operational budget. It does seem like a lot of money, I get that. In Te Manawa's presentation, they referenced comparative museums. They suggested we looked at the Sargent in Whanganui, which is running at just short of $3 million, and only does art. So no science, no heritage, just art, $3 million for a population half the size of ours. Or we could look at Waikato Museum, where their budget is just short of 7 million. Yes, double the population, but significantly less visitors than Te Manawa experiences. So I said last week, and I say again, I think this is a really good value proposition. And we put it to our community, and I'm sure we will hear from them if they think that this is a space that we could cut back, and they would be happy to see these services reduced. But I don't think that's what we're going to hear, and I'd ask you to support this. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, we will vote. And that has passed 11 votes for, 2 against and 2 abstentions. All right, we'll move through to item 7, which is confirmation of minutes, page 9 of your papers. And it's around confirming the minutes of our ordinary meeting of the 7th February last week, 2024, Part 1 Public, be confirmed as a true and correct record. I'm happy to move that, seconded by the Mayor. Are there any matters arising? There being none, we will vote, please. And that has passed 14 votes for with 1 abstention. All right, we move through to number 8, which is our 2024-34 LTP consultation material update. Now there's an attachment under separate cover for you, but the report itself is on page 19 of our papers. I'll invite up Mr Murphy, Mr Mackay and Mr Dyberg to speak to that, to the CD material.
Morena koutou. We will take the report as read. We have incorporated the changes that were discussed last week, which is to the CD, which is summarised in the committee report. We haven't attached all the other supporting material, but the minor changes to those have been made. There is the opportunity to make further tweaks and adjustments to the CD as we work with audit over the next month before it comes back for formal adoption. So I know there has been some further queries by email about the CD and a response to those. So as we said, there's an opportunity to make adjustments to that document before it comes back to council in early March for formal adoption. Happy to answer any questions.
Excuse me. All right. No other comments? Okay. We'll go to councillors. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I've just got some questions about page 23 of the separate attachment. where there's a yellow background, couple of paragraphs on social housing and dog registration costs. I'm just wondering why those paragraphs are included. Are we expecting the report back from the recommendation that was passed last week on looking at options for changes in how we fund social housing and dog control? Are we expecting those reports to come back before we go out to consultation?
Certainly not for the social housing. I understand there is some work happening in the dog space, but certainly this was about, I guess, flagging that the council, in the CD, that the council will be undertaking this work.
I just question then why that paragraph is there at all, because some of the I guess suggestions in that paragraph are well ahead of any decision that's been made by council. So, for example, we have decided to consider some different models. We haven't decided to consider different models. We've asked for a report back on models. It doesn't mean that we're going to consider them. So I wonder if that paragraph needs to be there at all, given that we're not actually asking for people's opinion on anything regarding social housing at this point. And should we decide on a different model, it will be a separate consultation on its own, from what I understand from the advice we were given last week.
Well, I guess the options available to council are that they, the paragraphs are removed in totality, or they're adjusted to better reflect the resolutions that council passed last week.
Can I understand your rationale for having the paragraph about social housing in there at all at this point? Are you expecting members of the public to respond to that in some way?
I certainly take your point that there aren't options or information within the CD or the supporting material about the analysis that's to be undertaken, but it is, as I said, it was flagging that the work would be undertaken, so it's probably more a heads up than asking for feedback. So in that sense, you know, there's arguments either way for it coming in and out, and ultimately it's a decision for council.
Okay. As regards the paragraph on the dog registration costs, etc., you anticipate that there will be information you will anticipate there will be information before we sign off the draft?
Yeah, I think what we're anticipating to bring back as part of the fees and charges discussion is to highlight what you could do to the fees to keep it within compliance, and there'll be an elected member decision at that point whether that's something you would like to do, or whether you want to adjust the revenue and financing policy at that point. So you would be making a decision prior to consultation, I would think, on that matter.
Okay. And as regards on the same page, the 18 million for Huia Street Reserve Housing, that just came in on this budget. What is it possible to put more of a description on that page as to what that is? Because what that $18 million spend represents? Because I think it's not very clear. Just 18 million for Huia Street Reserve Housing. What that 18 million is for?
Yeah, I think part of the challenge there, Councillor Johnson, is that the council hasn't made or considered any papers about, you know, what form of development, the type of housing development will be undertaken on that site. It has passed resolutions to repurpose the reserve for housing, to undertake the rezoning, which is underway, but the level of reporting that we saw, say, for Summerhays versus Huia Street hasn't happened. So, in effect, it is a placeholder program. for the development of Hui Street. I think the paragraph below that goes some way to, I guess answering your question. But maybe we need to be more explicit that it is effectively a placeholder program and no decisions are being made on the type of housing.
Well, I mean, I agree. I just wonder how we've come to a figure even of 18 million. Because what I understand has happened in the past is we've put placeholder budgets in long-term plans, and then when the actual project comes up, and it comes in at more than that, which it inevitably does, questions are then asked as to why the budget has quote-unquote blown out. Whereas in fact the original budget was just a placeholder budget that, somebody just, I don't know how much background has gone into determining the 18 million, so I don't want to be too harsh about it, but, what is that representing, that 18 million?
Kia ora, Bryce Hosking, Group Manager of Property and Resource Recovery. The simple answer is not a lot. It's based on some other housing projects we've done, such as Samaes, Tamakuku, and just trying to get a base rate per square metre, but there really isn't a heck of a lot more that's gone into it other than that at this stage, because it depends on what we would actually build, how we would build it, what the development would look like before I could give any kind of direction around what that might actually be. So it is literally nothing other than a placeholder.
So it's not a subdivision cost of building X number of houses?
It's very much a, if we were to build a 2-3 bedroom house multiplied by a square metre rate, essentially was the only way we could actually determine something to go in the budget, so at least it was represented in some way. But I have to really emphasise 18 million is not really based on anything at this stage.
Thank you. That is what I suspected. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, gentlemen. Just building a little bit on Councillor Johnson's questions. My understanding around the animal shelter from written questions to staff prior to this meeting was that the intent was to delete the animal shelter paragraph from the CD, which to my understanding would be it either moves to the support section or is totally vaporized. Can I just confirm that that's your intent at this stage?
Yeah, I had a conversation about that this morning actually, because on one hand, the committee report talks about the fact that we've introduced that text to reflect the decisions that were made last week, and then so look, I think thinking about Cam's answer earlier, that there will be some information coming back about the dogs prior to the LTP going out, probably warrants the updating the advice that the dog sentence can be deleted. It would be a council decision as to whether or not you want to flag in the CD that you are looking to undertake some work on social housing. But we don't have information and options for the public to engage in. It would effectively be a heads up. So whether you want to take the opportunity to provide that heads up or not.
Thank you. Running on page numbers for the consultation document, page 25 of the CD is part of the list of ways that we are seeking to moderate the rates rise, and that center column had some language in it about projects that we have stopped. And I just wanted to get an indication of how we're shaping up, being able to demonstrate what has been stopped since, say, the Mark 1 budget that came to us a number of months ago.
Andrew Boyle, Head of Community Planning. So we've gone through the committee records of those public meetings and identified the projects that were considered but not included. and have a list of those that we can put in the supporting material. We can also go back and look at some of the budgets that were reduced by committee and include them as examples.
Can we get an indication of what the total value of those projects, well, non-projects are that have been stopped?
I can send it to you after this meeting, yes. I don't have it with me at the moment, the list.
Indication if it's in the millions, tens of millions, hundreds?
I can't recall, sorry.
All right,
I can have
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I think I'll leave it there for now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it would be hundreds of millions by my calculations. And I'm getting nods from finance, so I think that's given a bit of an answer. Just before I go to Councillor Naylor, so just back to Huia Street, and because of the costs don't have a huge amount of science around them, wouldn't it be easier just to pull that totally, because there is no income as well, and I appreciate that, you know, that comes after the construction, but because it is year 10, I think, in the plan, would it not be just easier to pull that?
Well, it is a placeholder budget in the 10-year plan, and it is, I guess, the repurposing of that piece of land for housing. I mean, the substantive decision for that has been made by the council. I guess it signals, in my mind, it signals council's intention to invest on the site, which is a good thing for the CD to contain.
I agree, but I think we get ourselves in trouble consistently in local government by putting placeholders there that actually have no science to them. I don't disagree with the intent that we're going to do something, and possibly it might not even be us, it might be others that are doing it and we're a partner in it. But I'm of the view that we get rid of it, because it's going to create, people are going to look at it and go, what are you doing there? And we won't actually have an answer other than, oh, we've put a square metre rate on. We can bring it back in 3 years' time. The intent's always there.
Well, maybe in that case, you know, just describe that there is a placeholder program for Huia Street.
Yeah. Again, you know, my opinion is that we get rid of it, and we may make a statement that we are looking in the upcoming, the next LTP to firm our ideas on what we're doing. We've got a lot on our plate by the look of this CD currently, and this just adds a little bit more confusion to the whole mix.
Ultimately, it's the council CD, so if you'd like that removed, then we'll do that.
All right, I'll leave that to comments and I can come back.
I'll just add as well, we'll obviously a bit of debate on this particular page. We'll go away and actually have a look at some other wording associated with it, but we could easily have a look at saying that there's council's intention is to continue to invest on its properties, and look at not including a sum amount and those sorts of things as well. So we'll have a little bit more of a look at that.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just would be useful to get a bit of clarity about, I think someone said in the introductory comments that we'll be refining the consultation document over the next month or so. So I'm hearing that's an evolving, that we can continue to change that. Am I correct in understanding that?
I think that the types of a lot of the, for instance, a lot of the questions we got through on email over the last couple of days were minor amendments. So we need to make sure that, you know, I think minor amendments are fine, but we will need to obviously be working closely with Audit New Zealand over the next month around any sort of more substantive changes.
So in terms of, because some of my feedback, I'm not sure whether it would be defined as minor amendments or not. If we want to make changes that might be outside of minor amendments, would we need to do that today, or can we do that in March?
It's best, if you'd like to make more than minor amendments, it's best that those are signalled today, so that there's an opportunity for the council to consider them.
Okay, thank you. And can minor amendments be also made to the supporting information over that same period?
Minor amendments can be made to supporting information, but anything beyond that, because Audit New Zealand will be looking at that to
Yeah.
support its CD review.
Thank you. So I'll just go through a few of the feedback points that I've got in the consultation document. There is one that is on page 49 of the document, which is the graph that's the net debt forecast. And this graph is also in the supporting information. It's got the starting point there as 300 million, but in the supporting information, it says that where our debt is going to increase from 258 million to the 660 million. And so I'm just wondering if those graphs should be adjusted to reflect the 258 being the starting point.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that first point on that graph shows the position at the end of year one. So it's at the end of the year, debt position, not the start of the year, the debt position. So 24-25 being year one of the LTP, it shows the closing debt balance of that year.
So should we not start at the beginning of year one if this is a 10-year plan starting from the beginning of year one to the end of year 10?
I guess we could put in the annual plan expected debt balance as a point before the LTP starts and make that clear.
Yeah, well, it's just that the commentary and the supporting information right just before the graph says it's going to increase from 258 to 660, but then the graph looks kind of different. So I don't know how many people look at that, but I found it a little bit confusing why the numbers didn't match the graph.
You can look into it.
Yeah, thank you. And just in terms of the increased fees and charges part, which is on page 25, if we were to make, because that paper's not coming till March, and if elected members want to have more input into how that might look, can we make that a change to that part of the consultation document after the March?
Yeah, so as you can see, there's a placeholder there that enables that for any decisions that you might make around fees and charges.
Yep, okay, thank you. Now, I'm just also wanting to support the comments that some of the comments that Councillor Johnson's already made. Well, slightly different really, but around the council's social housing and the animal shelter, I also, when I read those, thought that wasn't necessarily accurate or objective information. Some of the information in there is not consistent with the intent of the resolutions from last week, and could actually provide, spark a bit of alarm in our community, particularly around the suggestion that if the council is to maintain its policy of limiting rents to 25% of income, that we'd need to, some of that, there's no suggestion of increasing rents, and I think if we start to put that in the commentary, it's quite outside of objective information. Some of the information in both of those comments are preempting some of what might be in those reports and might be for us to consider, but I don't think it's objective information, and I think it's premature for, if there is commentary, I think it should be primarily on the resolutions from last week that are seeking information back for us to consider. But I don't think we should start to get into comments like, if we had significant increases, there is a risk that some people may not register their dogs and that we'd also have difficulties rehoming dogs. I mean, those are issues that may be included in a report back. It's premature to be, I think, putting that's putting a slant on things, and that's way beyond what I think's been asked for at this point. So I guess my comment...
Sorry, is it a question or a comment?
I guess my question is, if that is to be changed, is that a minor amendment, or do we need to give further direction at this meeting?
I think the Chief Executive indicated earlier that we were going to reflect significantly on the content of pages 22 and 23.
Okay, thank you. And the other one that I mentioned last week is on page 3, and it's in the 5 facts to know about our long-term plan. the first one, it says we've cut a lot of existing budgets. Now, my understanding is that we're increasing our expenditure by 17.9 million going into year one. What do you think people in the community will be interpreting existing budgets as?
Yeah, so that could have an interpretation as to we've cut budgets in terms of the rates increase, well, the rates number. I guess what it's trying to signal is that there are a number of budget lines where we have reduced to have a lower rates increase than what we otherwise would have had is probably the intent of what we're trying to say with that.
Do you think there's a better way of saying it that might more accurately reflect I mean, I don't believe that's a true statement for my understanding of.
So councillor, is it a question or a comment?
Okay, the question is what existing budgets do we have that have been cut in terms of the activity at an activity level? Because I couldn't find any.
Hold on, the CE just wants to comment.
Yes, through the chair, we'll take a look at that one as well, and just perhaps better reflect that. We've had a couple of goes at it now, I think, but we'll have another look as well.
Thank you. Well, I'm just asking questions.
I understand that, but
Okay, can I carry on, Mr. Mayor?
Just one moment. Did you have a point of
just
order?
had a question for the chair.
Yes.
At this point, is it appropriate for staff to be making changes based on the questions or comments of one elected member?
Yeah, I'm going to test that
Okay.
when we wrap
thank
it
you.
up, because I do believe we've got one member that's not happy, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. But I want to test the room when we go to move the motion.
I'm happy to move, test the room and move it as recommendation if that's required, but that's why I've asked the question.
Well, I'm sorry, councillor, but you've delved into comments as well consistently. So, is there any more questions?
Yeah, there's quite a few more questions.
Be descriptive on what they are. Otherwise, I'll go to members.
Okay, thank you. The rates increase, page 50 of the consultation document, where it's got the breakdown of the drivers to the 11.7% increase in year one. I'm just interested to understand what the main drivers are for the 9.9 and 9.8 in year 2 and 3 are. Don't think we've got commentary on that, but my understanding previously, if we've done that shift up that's outlined in that chart of to cover the interest costs and all those other increases, does that not set us on a correct level, and would we not expect more CPI type increases after that? I'm just trying to understand the drivers for those big increases in year 2 and 3.
I'll have a crack, but Scott may want to jump in on this, but predominantly a number of the increases are driven from programs and from the increase in the debt profile to fund the capital program.
Thank you. I suspect that might be the case. Thank you. So just to continue on in terms of that, looking at the size of the capital program in those first 3 to 4 years and the supporting information in attachment 3 from last week, the budget whole of council capital new program totals at the bottom of that page indicate a huge step up for the capital new, going to 199 million excluding growth by year 4. I'm just wondering, when we had the Mark II budget graphs come to us last year, there was a much more gradual increase in the capital program, particularly around the strategic programs, and looking at the profile of where the capital new investment seems to sit now, it seems very much weighted in the first 3 to 4 years. I'm just wondering if there has been any consideration of spreading those strategic investment capital new programs across the 10-year plan rather than what appears to me to be very much in those first 3 to 4 years? And has that been a shift from what was originally outlined in our Mark II budget?
My understanding is that the only changes from the Mark II budget to where we are now are reflective of decisions that were made through that period of time, is my understanding. And when we're looking at capital new as a whole, part of the big uplift in that is around big ticket items such as starting to move into the Nature Calls program, the community building those things, and earthquake strengthening.
Okay, thank you. So just to, I have a query on one of the items that appears to have moved forward from what the information that we were provided in December, and that's around the CET Arena Master Plan redevelopment that had $51 million spread over 10 years. And there was a resolution supported by Council in December to reduce that 51 to 36 million. And I think in those capital programs, I think we were told there were about 5 main big projects across that time. The resolution was to fund Arena 5 and the rear fields alignment. There was no suggestion at that point of bringing any of those budgets forward. So my understanding of how that resolution would be interpreted was that the budgets would reduce for the other programs that weren't the Arena 5 and the rear fields alignment. I'm just wondering why that 36 million has now been condensed into the first 6 years, causing quite a significant increase to the first 3 years. It was 7 million, now it's 12, and the first 6 years was only 24 million, and now it's 36. So effectively, I guess I'm questioning whether the intent of that resolution has been carried out. Perhaps what direction was given for that to be condensed, which had the opposite effect, I think, to what the intent of what we were trying to do at that time was, which was to reduce the capital program.
So there was some answer to that put out in the email from yesterday, but I'll get Bryce Hosking just to explain a little bit more about the interdependencies that have driven that.
Essentially, the master plan, as you've rightfully pointed out, is made up of a whole bunch of individual projects. And so the only way to give effect to reducing the capital budget from circa 50 million down to 36 is around what projects would essentially be deferred in their entirety. Many of those, such as the rear fields, there was sort of 2 or 3 sort of interlinking projects that are all essentially connected. So you either have to do all 3 or none. You couldn't really do one or the other. And so the only way to really give effect to that is to do a bit of a reforecast of how we could actually deliver that in a practical sense, and that did require us to move some budgets around. The overall budget over the 10 years did decrease as per the resolution, but that's where some of the moving around has gone as opposed to anything extra being brought in.
In terms of that reforecasting, was the intent to the resolution to be reducing the capital program, was that considered?
Well, the resolution was to reduce it from 51 to 36 and effect to that.
And why was that not flagged to elected members last week in our papers or in the comments from staff? How were elected members meant to be alerted to such a significant change in?
I think he's answered the question in the sense that we've stuck to the resolution. The timing's changed, and he's answered that as well.
Okay, so
Sorry, there's a lot of other people want
Yeah.
to speak.
This
Is there any more questions?
yeah, I do have a few more
Okay,
questions.
we'll
I can come
hold
back to
them.
me.
We're gonna hold them.
Okay.
Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I've only got one question. This is for the CE. Just in light of the last couple of days, what's come about from the government, where in this document do you think we need to have a discussion about water? Just even if we don't know ourselves what's going forward with water, our community will want to know what we're doing with water. What do you think we should be putting forward in terms of water?
Yes, through the chair, I think that in the CD we have highlighted the fact that we're still sitting in a space where there are a little bit of unknowns. Most councils across the country have included Three Waters across the course of their entire 10-year plan, and that seems to, and for us, I think that that's appropriate, given the size of Nature Calls and a few of those other projects as well. We will be needing to manoeuvre we have or know more information, and over the last week at last week's meeting, I think there was still further conversations about Three Waters and waiting for decisions to come out and the like in that as well, and it's kind of one of those particular situations where I think that we've been as open as we can be with the community in the CD document about Three Waters based on what it is that we currently know at this point in time.
So currently on page 49 it talks about the key projects is Natural Calls wastewater project. Do you think that we should be putting a little bit more in?
We have had conversations with Audit and others in relation to this. Again, I think that that project is still progressing through its consenting phase and the like, and that might very well produce some other additional information that we do need to know about in time. But at this point in time, I'm reasonably comfortable with the information that's in here about Three Waters that's going out to the community.
Just if I could help, there is some further commentary on page 16 of the CD or page 19 of the order paper. Talks about water poses our biggest challenge, the reform, and signals that it's a placeholder as we get more information. So obviously there was announcements yesterday. We wouldn't have to update that based on the announcements yesterday, but certainly before it is adopted by council for consultation, there would be an opportunity to reflect on the content of page 16 based on the announcements yesterday.
Okay.
And also, councillor, page 18 and page 19 has quite around Nature Calls wastewater or resource water project. It does give some early estimates if we were picking up a levy per ratepayer for the whole thing. We don't know if we're doing that yet, and it's a bit premature to go to the public and say we are paying for 100% of this, lock, stock and barrel. We just don't know. We could be paying for 80% of it, 75% of it, maybe less, I don't know.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and a little bit along the same lines as Councillor Hopita, but just noting some councils around the country are now talking about delaying their long-term plan implementation or process and blaming Three Waters uncertainty around that. I just wanted to confirm that we're still on a 30 June timeline.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, Councillor Dennison online, but I think he's comments, so I'll go back to you, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I think just two more from me. I noticed a change in the operational costs as compared from the December papers to these papers, and I do understand there's been some realignment with some of the costs, but for the international travel, it's gone up from the 511,000 to the 620,000. And I did ask a question about that, and I think the answer was to do with the realignment of some of the back office costs. So is the new amount, the 620,000, does that reflect more accurately the actual cost of providing, delivering that activity?
There are two parts to the cost structure. One is the direct costs of the activity, and then we have a allocation method to allocate out basically the corporate back office costs and the like. And so it's, the only increase to that budget has been from the allocation methodology for the back office costs. You'll see that some other activities have decreased. Sometimes it's just the way that they do fall.
So would it, in terms of my question, would that, can we assume from that that the 620 is a more accurate reflection of the cost to deliver that?
What I would say is that if you did not do that the activity, there's still the overhead portion of the activity would have to be redistributed to other activities of council. So it's best to always consider the direct operating cost of the activity as the genuine additional cost of having the activity.
Okay, thank you. And just my last question is relates to the size of the capital program, and I guess reflecting on some of our capital projects in years gone by, there has been the capital cost has been focused on at the time of budgeting, but not necessarily the associated operational costs and renewals. And I'm just wondering for, I think there's 1.85 billion of capital programs in this plan. Are all the operational and renewal costs associated with that capital new and capital growth, is that all included in our budgets currently?
We do budget for what we call consequential budgets, which as a result of doing capital programs, it derives additional operating budgets. Obviously, once the thing is closer to construction and scoped appropriately and that sort of thing, you'll have more certainty over it, but we do make allowances for the increase in operating costs.
Okay. Sorry, just
one addition to that. So you mentioned renewals as well. What we tend to see is that the renewal cost associated with a new asset will generally fall outside the 10-year period. Right. So that's why you don't adjust for that.
One more.
Okay, sorry, just following up on my other question before about the 9.9 and 9.8 in the years 2 and 3 being obviously around supporting that debt profile. Do we need to, I mean, we've done a good job of explaining the drivers of year 1 on that page in the consultation document. Given that the main thing that we lock in an LTP is the first 3 years, do we need to give any sort of rationale for those increases in year 2 and 3, or would it be appropriate to do that? Could we do that through minor amendments, or is that?
I think, from my perspective anyway, that the consultation document does talk about the key themes impacting upon council, particularly around debt and those sorts of things. We have shown a bit more of a breakdown for year 1. I'm not sure how much value there is of showing additional breakdowns for year 2 and 3. You'll have a chance to revisit those in each annual budget. I guess what it does show by showing the 10 years of the rates increases, it sends a signal of the totality of the program, what that might mean as we are today to ratepayers.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, just a quick question. Cameron, you said that it's always best to consider the direct operating costs of an activity, because if we stop doing that activity, the overheads would need to be redistributed to the other activities. So when it comes to things like social housing or animal management, do we, when we're working out the policy of what user pay should be, do we consider the direct operating costs, or do we consider direct operating costs plus overheads?
Yeah, it's the total cost of the activity is what we're required to show in terms of the revenue and financing policy. So that is direct plus overhead, so the total cost that you'll see against an activity budget.
So it would be fair to assume then, were we to stop doing either of those activities, that the overhead costs that currently we're stipulating that users need to pay X% of would still be within the business and would need to be redistributed to other cost centres?
Yes, provided the business stays the same size as it was before the activity stopped.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, councillors. Right, we have recommendations here. Thank you to the officers, appreciate that. That council agree the consultation document for the draft 2024-34 long-term plan, attachment 1, be provided to Audit New Zealand. That council agree the supporting material for the draft 24-34 LTP presented in attachments 3 to 10 to the council meeting on the 7th of February 24, with minor amendments as directed at the meeting, to be provided to Audit New Zealand. I'm happy to move those, and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All right, we've got a number of amendments, so just bear with us. So we've moved 1 and 2, but there's a number of amendments that affect both 1 and 2, so we'll take those first, and we'll just give us a moment while we get them up on screen. All right, we'll go through Amendment 1 because that's pretty straightforward, and that's moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Bowen, and it's around paragraphs regarding the social housing animal shelter costs be removed from page 23. Councillor.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. As you would have gathered, colleagues, from my questions and questions from other members, I'm not that comfortable that these two paragraphs be included. The paragraph around social housing does, to some degree, predetermine possible outcomes from a report back that we haven't had yet. And I am concerned that it's not proposing anything for people to give an opinion about in the consultation document, but it will create fears and uncertainty. And so I would prefer that that paragraph is removed. If there's a sentence somewhere that says you know, we've asked for a report back on social housing, etc. That's fine. But talking about increasing, you know, trying to maintain rents at an income-related rent and so on, when we haven't had any discussion yet, or any sight even of what options might lie in front of us, I think is a bit premature. I understand that animal shelter costs reporting back will come to us before we do the consultation, but my discomfort with that paragraph is that it's in a section about housing of people, and I just don't think it's appropriate to have animal shelter a discussion in amongst people housing. I think should be a separate page. Again, I don't mind if there's some, you know, heads up, I think was the word that the officers used, you know, about costs, but again, speculating on consequences and so on, I think is probably a bit premature at this point. So I know the CE said he would take another look at it, but I just wanted to be clear that I don't think that either of these paragraphs are appropriate in the consultation document at that point. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Okay, so what we'll do, we'll just vote on Amendment 1, if that's okay, and we'll just work our way through these amendments. So just voting on what Councillor Johnson just spoke to, number 1 there, Amendment 1. And it has passed 11 votes for and 4 against. All right, we've got another new amendment to our Resolution 1, and we'll get that up, please. All right, this is from Councillor Naylor, seconded by Councillor Wood, and it is around the words "we've cut a lot of existing budgets" as changed. It's changed on page 3, and Councillor. Oh.
Thank you. I've got the feedback the 2 times this week and last week when I've suggested that I'm not comfortable with this wording, that view hasn't been shared by everyone around this table. And whilst I realise there are some minor amendments, I thought this was one that perhaps needed to be tested in the room. I haven't specified what it needs to be changed to. I'm happy for staff to go away and look at wording, if this is supported, wording that better reflects the reality of the situation. My reason for proposing this is I think we've got to be really honest with our community, and I don't believe this statement accurately communicates to them what is happening in this 10-year plan. Existing budgets to most people would understand existing budgets to be budgets that currently exist. I don't think it's true to say that we've cut a lot of existing budgets. We have increased, we're proposing to increase our our overall expenditure by 17.9 million going from this year to year one of the budget. And whilst there's been some shuffle rounds of some of the back office costs between individual activities, I don't think I've found any activity where we could say that we've cut existing budgets. Yes, we've had proposed capital programs that we've reduced or we've cut. Those have not been programs that I would think people would understand as existing budgets. So I'm asking that you support this just so that we can be a little bit more honest and clear in our communication with our community, that they don't misunderstand what it is that the consultation document is saying, what we're trying to communicate to them. So I'd urge you to support that in the interests of honesty and transparency to our community.
To the mover and seconder, would you be up for just cutting the word existing? Okay, all right, well, I'll comment. I just needed it's a yes or no. Okay, all right. I won't support this because actually we've cut hundreds and hundreds of millions off budgets that have been brought into us. And if you want to be transparent to your colleagues around the table, continue with what you're doing. But it's a slap in the face of people around this table to say that we've done nothing. Things change, councillor, and they change consistently. Your own household budgets change. To sit there and say we haven't done a thing is absolute rubbish. And frankly, I'm getting sick and tired of it. It's a view that you can have, but I don't believe it's consistent of this room. So if you were going to say existing, the word existing, yes, I would go with that because it's technical. But to actually say we're going to get rid of the whole, we haven't done anything, is absolutely wrong. It's wrong. And I won't support it, I'm sorry. We've done a lot of work to get this manageable. And it's not your right or my right to say what this should be. It's actually the public that will decide. So I had a chance to change it, but you won't, so I won't support this, and I urge you not to support it either. I think we're just being semantic and relitigating what we've just spent months doing, so don't support it. Councillor Johnson.
Well, I was going to start to list all of the budgets that we'd cut, but I've got too many pages of notes to be able to list them all, and I think I'll try all your patience. But I will just bring one budget that was cut to your attention, and that was the budget for upgrading local street amenity, like the budget that was used to upgrade the Highbury shops. That budget was cut. I remember that 4 separate budgets were cut for reserves that I didn't agree with. I mean, there was a whole lot of budgets that were cut. Existing budgets that were used in this financial year that we won't have next year. So to say that we're not being honest by saying we've cut a lot of existing budgets is it's the exact opposite of being honest. We have cut a lot of existing budgets. Maybe not as many as some councillors would have wanted. I understand that. But for those of us who've had to see a number of budgets for important projects that we thought were valuable be cut, it's quite galling to then see the very same councillors that wanted those budgets cut say that we haven't cut anything. So you can't have it both ways. If you want to say we haven't cut a lot of existing budgets, let's go back to those debates and let's not cut those things that I thought were actually very important. So yeah, I won't be supporting this.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to spend an hour debating semantics. You are right, it is just one sentence. But firstly, to your point, to suggest that this is saying we've done nothing, that's not the intention here. If we look at what was in our consultation document last week, underneath that sentence, it said we've done all we can to keep rates down. That has now been changed to we can assure you that we've considered every expense to keep rates down, which is absolutely true. And so all we're looking for is a change similar or akin to that, not to say that we've done absolutely nothing and that everything's as bad as it possibly could have been. The reason I've seconded this is because just factually Councillor Naylor is right. If you're getting paid $60,000 a year and you're hoping for a pay rise to $70,000 a year, and your manager says, actually you're only getting a pay rise to $65,000, do you then complain to your manager that you've had a pay cut? No, you have had a pay increase. What we've done, the Mayor's correct, we've cut a lot of theoretical budgets or provisional budgets or potential budgets. And so, yes, I'd be fine if we wanted to change the wording to we've cut a lot of potential increases to budgets down to smaller increases. But that's why we haven't prescribed exactly what the wording would be. But it is not factually correct to say that we have cut our budgets, because as Councillor Naylor said, we are, and as the officer said, we have reduced the rise to some budget lines. That's a Briscoe's cut. That's not a real cut. And so I just think it's fair to give the officers an opportunity, as the CE indicated he'd be happy to do, to just tailor that language to be more specific. But I completely agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I've sat through all the meetings you've sat through as well, and I would hate for it to say that we've done nothing, because that's not true. We've done a lot. This could have been a lot larger than it was. But it's, and look, if this fails, it's not the end of the world. It's just to be more accurate in reflecting what we've done, we have reduced the rise to some budget lines. And how that's reflected in the wording by the CE and his team is up to him. But I'm happy to support this because apparently this is quite a political sentence. So it isn't fair for this just to be something that one councillor says to the CE, can you go do, and he goes and does it. I think it's appropriate to get a feel from the chamber as to where we sit. And if we don't want to change it, that's perfectly fine. I'm not angry or passionate about this. I just think it's a good thing to do to accurately reflect what the process that we've gone through and the changes that we've made.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. Just two brief comments. I first find it incredibly difficult to hear this couched in the terms of honesty and dishonesty, and I would invite elected members to reflect on when it's appropriate to use those words in this space. I think the other thing that I'd say at this point is it really draws much more sharply into focus for me on the line of questioning that I was working on earlier in terms of actually quantifying what has been achieved through excellent work from officers and our collective work in this chamber to pare back a number of budgets. And I would struggle to see them characterized in a big box sense, because I think that the starting point for Mark 1 was not an inflated sense of worth. The starting point for Mark 1 was what this community actually needs for its future. And when we think about that and the millions and millions and millions that have been cut back, I think we need to be very clear and honest and prominent with that number for this community so they well understand that what will be going out in this consultation document strikes a balance, and that they can see both sides of that balance when they come and submit to us. Thank you.
Councillor Mickelard online. Just stop, Councillor. We're trying to get you online. Okay, away you go, Councillor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to speak around this recommendation, and also want to speak against this recommendation. And I want to also appreciate the comments that have been made before me by the councillors that have spoken against us. Wanted to say that we have done a lot of work around us, and we spent a lot of time going through the budgets line by line. We spent a number of days over the past few months going through the budget line by line, and to make sure that we find some savings in order to reduce rating impacts on our residents. And for me personally, I understand that for the mover, I mean, for some councillors, and particularly the mover or the seconder, that some of these cuts didn't probably go deeper than they probably wanted. but it doesn't mean that we didn't spend a lot of work on this, trying to reduce deferred projects in order to make cuts to make it easier on residents. So to say that we haven't made cuts of existing budgets and everything is totally a misrepresentation of the work that we've been doing for the past few months. So I think that we've done all that we can to keep rates down by cutting projects, by deferring projects, by slashing some projects, or by reducing budgets. And all of those attempts were done in order to reduce the rating impact on residents. So it was the council found it appropriate for us, or found it that, where we've landed was appropriate, given the circumstances that other councils are also facing, whether it comes to, interest rates rises, insurance costs, and those sort of things. This is where we landed, and we felt we're comfortable. So I understand that some councillors probably felt like we didn't go as deep or as much as they wanted and that sort of thing, but I feel like we've landed. And if the community feels strongly about this, then they will tell us, because it's going for consultation. They will tell us what needs to be done, what needs to be incorporated back into the budget. So this is where we've landed, and we're asking the communities for their input. And if the community feels strongly about this, they will let us know. And then we'll make some of those changes that they want us to make. This is going for consultation. That's what consultation is meant to do, to ask for feedback. And we're waiting on that feedback to come back to us and act upon those feedback. So I'm comfortable where we've landed. And I think it's a misrepresentation of the work that we've been doing for some councils to say that we haven't done any cuts and that sort of thing, or we haven't reduced deferred projects to reduce the rating impacts on residents. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Never in the history of human endeavour have 7 words caused so much debate, I think. I don't really care, actually, the way this is phrased. I think what we're trying to do is express in a shorthand way the vast amount of work that has gone in to get us to this place. We might all talk about that in different ways, and I'd be very surprised if any members of our community are kept awake at night debating what existing might or might not mean in the context of this sentence. I think it's important to put this in the bigger picture of a document that tries to set out a complicated process with lots of levers that we've pulled to get to where we are. And at that point, they'll come back and tell us about it. And these 7 words won't make much difference to that. So I won't support removing them. Thank you.
Right, a reply, councillor.
Thank you. Clearly, this is a very small part of a big piece of work that we have in front of us, and I would have been happy if it had been considered a minor amendment. But in the clear view that wasn't shared around the table, I did want to test it. I totally agree with many of the comments that have been made. We have worked really hard around this table to reduce proposed budgets, and I'm not saying that we haven't done. What I am saying is that I think we just need to be mindful of language that might be misleading. Perhaps Councillor Barrett's point, perhaps honesty is overstating it, but it may well mislead people reading it in terms of what their interpretation of that might be. I'm really comfortable with us saying that we've reduced a lot of proposed budgets. I'm really, that is throughout the document. As someone said, it already says we can assure you that we've considered every expense to keep rates down. But this particular comment, I think perhaps will be a little bit misleading to the average person who thinks cutting existing budgets means that some of our existing budgets are going to be less than what they currently do. And in the light of us increasing 800 million to our capital program as compared to our last LTP, and increasing 17.9 million even in the first year in terms of what we spend, I think that it doesn't accurately reflect. I think it's probably a little bit insulting for people who are facing huge rates rises to be told this. All I'm suggesting, I didn't want to wordsmith it and tell staff exactly what the words should be. Many of what people around this table have suggested, such as that we've reduced a lot of proposed budgets, I'd be quite comfortable with. But I think the existing budgets part of it does not align with my understanding of what has happened, and this document does not reflect that. So I would encourage you to see this for what it is. It's to change this wording. It's not to communicate. I don't have any issue that we still want to communicate the work that we have done already, and that is not to take away from that.
All right, councillors, we'll vote on Councillor Naylor's amendment. And that has failed. 4 votes for and 11 against. All right, we have one final. No, we have more. Okay. We might take a break, I think. All right, we're back in the chamber here at 22. Thanks. Sorry, not 22. At 10 to. All right, kia ora everyone, welcome back. What we'll do is we'll move number 1 in totality, and then we'll move through to number 2 because there's further amendments to number 2. But I just want to get some traction and get something underway. So this is around that council agree the consultation document for the draft 2034 long-term plan attachment 1 be provided to Audit New Zealand subject to the agreed amendment. So Councillor Naylor has spoken to it. Is there any others that wish to speak to it? And Councillor Johnson. Is there any others that wish to speak to the CD? Okay, well, I'll just make a brief comment. Just again, thanking the staff for the work. There's a lot in there, and of course we are always bound by Audit New Zealand's guidelines. Hence, I suppose the length of the document. I'm more about less is best, but we've got a lot going on, including not only changes to our LTP and particular projects, including what I'd say the 2 biggies are around water and transport, but of course all the other community initiatives that have come to us via this chamber and our connections. I think it's a real step up, and I will put on record that we have done a good job, I believe, in trying to balance what is a really difficult situation of affordability. I won't deny that. If you put into context, over the next 10 years, we're spending 2.1 billion on waters. In comparison to some other cities around us, including our capital city, that's more. So, that's pretty significant. It means we're taking water and our role in that very, very seriously. Also in terms of transport, and we are a transport node, and we're much bigger in transport than just our pure population. And that's something that I'll be speaking to the government of the day about, and having more investment in us, because at present and in the past there hasn't been a lot of targeted investment around transport for us. And we're spending 2.6 billion on that, as well as the other community initiatives, but in comparison there's very small investment in those compared to those 2 big items. So I think the public will have a fair say on all of that, and we'll wait and see what comes back from our residents. But thanks to the colleagues around the table. It was pretty tough December, to be fair. We desperately needed a holiday after the meetings, and we've kicked it around again in this early new year as well to ensure that we've got things as balanced as can be. Appreciating that it's probably not everybody's exact cup of tea, but I think it's a pretty good balanced document considering where we started. So I'd like you to support it, please. There being no other speakers, we'll vote, please, on number 1, the substantive. And that has passed 14 votes for and 1 against. Okay, we will get the amendments up for number 2. Okay, so this is the first. This is the only one. Okay, this is the only one amendment to substantive number 2, and this is around subject to amending the timing for program 1194 CET Arena to spread the $36 million investment across the 10 years of the LTP with a maximum of $7.67 million in the first 3 years. It's moved by Councillor Naylor, second by Councillor Bowen. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I teased this out a little bit during questions. I guess over the last couple of weeks, I've spent quite a bit of time just taking in a lot of the numbers around the LTP and tried to understand what's driving some of the increases. And certainly it's been really made quite the drivers to those year one increases. But I was a bit perplexed as to the 9.9 and 9.8, those high increases in years 2 and 3, because traditionally when we've had a big step up, that has kind of addressed the issues that, you know, those issues that were highlighted. And as we heard from the Chief Financial Officer, really what's driving that is our capital profile and the level of debt. And just observing the steepness that we're wanting to increase our capital spend. From last year, we had a big step up and we delivered 48 million. Looking at that profile of what we're proposing for particularly the first 3 to 4 years, including growth, we're wanting to quadruple that within the next 4 years. We're wanting to more than double it within the next 2 years. And in my mind, that's the biggest factor that's driving some of these big increases. The information that was provided to us in our workshops showed those strategic investments as quite nicely spread across the 10 years. But things have changed, and what we have in front of us now is a whole lot of those strategic investments packed, I think, quite heavily into the first 3 or 4 years. In my looking at that, I did become aware of the change to the CET Arena one from what had been outlined to us in December, and I was a bit perplexed as to what the driver was for that change, which actually results in quite an increase in the first 3 and the first 6 years, rather than the intent of the work that we were doing back in December was to try and reduce the capital program. So this resolution, officers explained that it was due to reforecasting the timing of some of those programs. In my view, there's no reason why the timing of those programs can't be reforecast to be better spread across the 10-year period. What I've proposed is in more alignment with the papers that were provided to us in December. We had a 7.67 million investment into the arena development in the first 3 years in those papers, and that was at the time that we reduced it from 51 to 36 million. So what I'm suggesting is, rather than the realignment that the office have done, pushing it all earlier, I'm suggesting a realignment to spread that more across the cost of that across the 10 years. And I guess the preamble in terms of my observations of the steepness of our increase to capital is partly what's driving my desire to at least test the room to see if we can at least get back to perhaps what we considered in December. My view is when there are significant changes like that, that should be highlighted to elected members. And now that that's come to our attention, I certainly would prefer the timing that was outlined to us in December.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, I'm not going to support this, and I suppose no surprise to you all around the room. I was actually the mover of this particular program, and originally it was, as those will remember, it was the master plan had over 100 million plus in it, and obviously that was never going to make the cut into the LTP. And officer suggestions were look at some programs that were connected at $56 million investment to keep the master plan and the viability of Arena alive. Now, just remind you, we're in a competition and a race here, and if you do decide to do this, I would suggest you don't do anything, because we will lose volleyball, basketball. We've already lost cycling. We'll lose a number of perhaps first 15 rugby, there'll be a number go because it suits some members around the table's version of where things should go. Out of good faith, I moved and showed some leadership to pull to 36 million for Arena, but I did that knowing that there was some programs that were connected. And the change is really to the timing only of those. So the backfields need to come together, and as the officer said earlier in his answers to some of the some councillor questions, they're connected programs. And if we don't do them in a relatively short time, they become unconnected. And Arena 5's another one, and those that know the indoor sport, we're under pressure for not only our own community and the needs of our communities, but also tournaments. So December papers were high level, and there was no real detail on where things can come. So, I mean, it's happened now. I think it's a relatively minor change, not a major or significant change. It's just what people's appreciation of what is affordable is. Just remind you too, Arena is a fantastic and a facility that washes its face pretty damn well. You just need to look at what's happening in Christchurch, the Auckland debate at the moment around stadiums. We're debating 36 million. They're talking billions in Auckland, and they're talking hundreds of millions of dollars run over in Christchurch. So we've got a really good facility which we should keep viable and keep on track with it. To deviate now at the 11th hour, I think would be foolish, really foolish, and you are playing with fire with some of these events. So please vote this down. It's 11th hour. I don't support it at all, and I ask you not to. Councillor Wood.
A question, if I could, Mr. Mayor, to the officers. Just reflecting on the officers' comments from the earlier questions, my understanding is the reason that this has been moved to here is because you can't spread two projects over 10 years. Would this even be possible if this was passed?
The only way we could give effect to this would be to move one element of a connected project, collection of projects from years 1 and 2 to be years 3 and 4. I'm not sure whether that actually gives effect to what you're trying to achieve in terms of the intent of this, but that's really the only way to do it in a practical sense. Or as per my earlier answer, you would almost be better to turn off a collection of projects rather than one element.
So to be clear, what was happening initially was there was perhaps 15 projects that were spread across the 10 years, and that's why there was a more even spread of spending. But those lumpy bits of spending for things like the field and for Arena 5 were still there and were still at the same level they are now. They've just been brought forward because other projects have been removed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
In particular, the Arena 5 project is still sitting in the same place, but the rear fields and the other associated projects with that were brought forward slightly to rearrange the program.
Thank you. I'll speak briefly, Mr. Mayor. Look, just to say that I agree with the Mayor, I mean, I'm all for reducing spending where we can. I supported this amendment to reduce it from 50 to 36, but the answer from the officer is quite clear. The issue that we've got here is that you've got reduced a number of programs, I can't remember exactly how many there were, but say 20 different programs in the CET Arena Master Plan, down to about 4 or 5. And so when you're spreading expenditure across a 10-year period, this lumpy expenditure still existed, it just existed slightly further out. And so all they've done is move it slightly forward because we're not doing a number of those smaller projects that were slated for years 1, 2 and 3. And so I guess the only thing, as the officer said, is that you'd move half of one project into year 4 and leave half in year 3 to make this expenditure reduction, which doesn't really achieve anything. So I normally support this kind of thing, but I think the answers given by officers are very practical. This isn't that they've increased the cost into particular projects. It isn't that they've put new things in. They've just moved where the spending's going to happen. And so we can shuffle it out a little bit or we can shuffle it forward a little bit, but it's 36 out of $100 million plan. It's going to have to be spent at some point, and as the Mayor's rightly said, these projects we've agreed as a council we want to do them, and so the only thing this does is push them further out. So I don't really see the value in terms of a saving for our community by doing it, so I won't support it.
Councillor Isabella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, likewise, I do appreciate where the mover is coming from and trying to smooth or ease the increase, but I think if we're weighing up cost, we must also weigh up deliverability, and the interlinked nature of these projects means they can't really be separated out without materially impacting the deliverability of the project. So I think the front loading essentially is the effect of our decision to reduce the budget and focus on those key pieces of work. So I won't be supporting this one on that basis. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To reflect on your comment about whether this is a significant change or not, I have to say I do agree with Councillor Naylor that it is quite a significant change that came through in the papers for today without a great deal of foreshadowing. And that was my reasoning for seconding this. I think it's important for us to understand the implications of the ordering of these programmes. Having said that, and having heard the officers' answers to questions, and thank you to Councillor Wood for raising those, I had similar issues of clarification that I would have raised. I think actually I won't support this amendment, and will be happy to see that investment as proposed by the officers. So it doesn't make any difference to the seconding of that, but just to explain that I think that's an important conversation for us to have, to understand not just the quantum of spending, but the flow of that spending, the interconnected nature of some of these projects, and the reasons that the officers have put forward for that programming, and happy to let that stand if that's the way the vote goes. Thank you.
Councillor Harper.
Thank you. Agree entirely with what Councillor Bowen has said. I think the backfields have been waiting to be done for many, many years, and we need to get on and do those backfields. And the community have wanted us to do those backfields for a long time. So I think delaying that would be at detriment to the community. So we've got to get on and do those backfields. And same with Arena 5. We can't delay what's happening at Arena 5. We have to get on and do a new arena and get on and do it. So, and there is a flow-on effect if we don't have the money to be able to do that Arena 5. The community want us to do it, so I won't support this recommendation.
Okay, no need for right of reply. We'll just vote on that Amendment 2, please. That is failed, 1 vote for and 14 against. All right. Move to number... No, we'll do the substantive, sorry, on number 2. We can just get that up. All right, and this is around that council agree the supporting material for the draft 2024-34 long-term plan presented in attachments 3 to 10 to the council meeting today, the 7th of Feb 24, with minor amendments as directed at the meeting to be provided to Audit New Zealand. So that's moved by myself and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All right, anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Naylor. Sorry, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor, you've already spoken. You've used your...
It was to the amendment.
No, you spoke to the substantive.
I haven't spoken to the substantive. There is a few things I'd like to say to the substantive that I haven't.
Well, I've got advice that you have, so I'm going to go with the advice. Sorry.
I haven't spoken to the substantive, Mr. Mayor. I was speaking just specifically to the amendment around the arena.
No. Yeah, and moving the amendment, you've actually spoken to the motion. It's in standing orders.
I haven't spoken to the substantive, Mr. Mayor. If you could allow me, I have a few things I'd like to say.
Can you keep it brief?
I'll try and keep it brief. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It will come as no surprise that I won't be able to support this plan. I think we have the real risk that proceeding with this plan might actually result in some home ownership being threatened for some. I think the plan fails to respond to the current cost of living crisis that many in our community are experiencing, and we do have some choice about how we stage the costs, and a lot of those costs, as I've said, do fall in those first few years. For the average single residential ratepayers, they will be, who pay currently $3,200 in rates, that will be up to around $6,000 a year within the next 5 years, which is about an 87% increase. And that's with the water charge, assuming it's around $1,000. I'm really concerned, and I feel that it's really important that we get the message out to our community, which I don't think is well described in this plan, and that is that there is a lot of choice within this plan. The first 3 years, the 307 million of capital spend, only 14%, 43 million is wastewater, the other 86 are other capital new projects, and many of those programs we do have some choice about. The reason I wanted to make this comment is I don't think that is really well described in our consultation document, and I think it's a message that's really important that our community hear, is that we do have options, and yes, it's a majority decision. Each thing that's put on the table is about whatever the majority decision is, but there are things in that plan that do not have a majority support for. There were things that we had to take them out failed through a lack of majority with a 7-all vote. So I'll leave it there. I did have more to say, but you did ask me to be brief, so I'll leave it there, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Likewise, I do share many of those concerns about the impact of this plan on our community, but I do note that the intent of this motion is to provide this additional supporting material to Audit New Zealand, and I think that is absolutely essential that we have our underlying assumptions, particularly the raising the debt cap, changes to the rating system, and foray into off-book, the world of off-book debt. Those underlying assumptions do need to be looked at by Audit New Zealand. I'm very happy to support this motion, that we are pressing forward with that approach, with the same timeline that we would have before the government waived the requirement for audit or consultation documents to be audited for this particular long-term plan round. So I think that if there are red flags that need to be raised, this is the way that we can help those be raised and get light shone on those through the proper audit process that we're going through. So happy to support that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, councillors. Look, I just want to, I wasn't going to comment, but I will. I don't think it's lost on anybody that there's an affordability issue, and I don't think anybody around the table here is denying that. What we've done is done the best that we can, and again I repeat that we can as a collective. Some of you don't agree with it, and that's fair enough, but the vast majority do. The vast majority do. And it's a balanced consultation document now that goes to audit. They've been involved in it too before now, so it's not as if it'll come to them as a big surprise. We've got some challenges around water. I'll just push back a little bit on some of the percentages and comments. I've been in business for 30 years. I can spin the percentages and that as well. But actually, 5 billion of this is around water and transport. That's the cold, hard facts. And we have to do that. We can't get away from doing that. So I don't know where the choice in some of that is. We've got to provide transport connections for our residents, and we've got to provide water services for our residents as well. So they're going to be the two things that I'm going to be really focused on as your mayor, and certainly around the water. We've got quite a lot to do in the very near future to find out exactly what that looks like. I agree there's some real affordability challenges, but we've got to be careful we don't scaremonger people as well, because there's still quite a, excuse the pun, but quite a bit of water to go under the bridge yet. So our community will tell us as well, so it's not really for we're the elected members, and certainly we have a very significant role to put this forward, but it'll be the public that will tell us what they deem is fair and reasonable. And I think looking around the country, I think we've struck quite a balanced view at this stage. So I ask you to support it, and we will vote, please. On number 2. And that is passed, 14 votes for and 1 against. Right, we'll now go to number 3, and this is from Mr. Naylor, and this is that the CE provide options to increase revenue, including increasing fees and charges, and options for new fees and charges. Moved by Councillor Naylor, seconded by Councillor Harpiter. Councillor.
Thank you. This area of revenue is something I highlighted last week that I was a bit concerned about, with the numbers only showing about a 20% increase in revenue, whilst at the same time asking the rates requirement more than doubling. And it does follow on from discussions that we've had at workshops, and just acknowledging that the paper on fees and charges is yet to come to us. I think that's scheduled for March. I did feel a bit concerned about the challenge of the timing of that, in terms of whether we need to indicate anything in our consultation document around an intent to increase fees and charges. And I think officers last week said it would be good if we could flag that sooner rather than later, if that was our intent. So this is really just testing the room, checking if the assumption here is supported by the room, and perhaps being a little bit proactive to ask for some of those options back, and also be able to potentially flag that in the consultation document, where there is a little bit of a write-up there with a blank in terms of the options. So, yeah, urge you to support that.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, I think this was going to happen anyway, in speaking to the CE, so I'm quite happy to support it. I would just say it's coming to us in a couple of weeks, I believe, the paper, but I just would urge a slight side of caution, in that some of our fees and charges are at the higher end already, compared to our competition in terms of other councils and that are around us. So there's some movement, but there'll be no silver bullet here, I don't believe. Included in this obviously is DCs as well, and there is, I think, in terms of the residential, some margin there that we can exploit, as we are on almost the lowest city in the country around DCs for residential. So I'll support it, but we'll just see without prejudging anything. I'll just urge a side of caution. There's no silver bullet here, but it will give us some slight relief, I'm sure, in the long run. Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I think where Councillor Naylor and I were going to with this, was what we were discussing in workshops, was more around a road toll, and in particular where potentially we may not get funding, potentially, from Waka Kotahi for the new road, for the new ring road. We could potentially look at a road toll, and that's what we were potentially looking at. We didn't want to put that in the recommendation because we wanted the CE to have a bit of creative licence in this area. So that's why I wanted to be a bit more specific in my comments, rather than Councillor Naylor being so specific. So that's why I'm being more descriptive. But it is about putting something like this in a consultation document and going out to the community and asking those questions of the community, because it's about those people that use this new road paying for it, and because we potentially won't get that potential revenue from Waka Kotahi. So that's where we're coming from with this. Thank you. Hope you support it.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Colleagues, I'm not going to support this, and so I just thought I would explain myself. I think it's very inconsistent to, on the one hand, comment that there's a cost of living crisis and to be concerned about how much we're rating people, and in the same meeting to be proposing that we increase revenue through increasing fees and charges and options for new fees and charges. The problem with fees and charges is that they fall the same on everybody. There's the same fee for registering a dog, whether you're on a benefit or you earn $100,000 a year. There's the same fee for the swimming pool entry, whether you're on a benefit or whether you earn $100,000 a year. My philosophy is that it's better for us to have lower fees and charges so that we're not actually impacting those who are on lower income, and to make sure that the funding comes through rating, which does bear at least some relation to people's ability to pay. So I'm philosophically opposed to raising fees and charges and adding in new fees and charges to try and somehow make ends meet. What it does is it causes an extra burden on low-income families and puts some services and options out of their reach. So I won't be supporting it for those reasons.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question really, can I understand if this recommendation, if passed, would send the Chief Executive on to a mission of revisiting the UAGC, the fixed charges for water, the fixed charges for rubbish and public recycling, fixed charges for curbside, etc.?
Through the chair, love your questions. I was probably focusing in more on fees and charges that are in the likely to be presented in the current plan. However, I also just make a comment that prior to council, there was a resolution, a much broader one, that actually is asking us to go away and have a look at other revenue opportunities across our strategic assets and opportunities to leverage those a little bit further. And also we have made some commentary along those lines in our finance strategy as well, that continuing to have a reliance on rates, we do need to have a look at other opportunities. So this I think just adds to the mix. It's just a continuation from my perspective of what you've already asked me to have a bit of a look at. I should point out that there's a couple of things in here, options for new fees and charges. There is little to no chance of getting my team to present some of those, any options for new fees and charges on the 6th of March when this comes back to you.
Thank you. So I think what I'm hearing from that is that the information that's currently in the consultation document around UAGC, et cetera, is unlikely to be affected by this particular recommendation?
That's correct.
Thank you. Brief comment. I'm probably have quite mixed views on this because I have great sympathy and concern along the lines of what Councillor Johnson's outlined. I've also got some appetite for understanding options, and certainly the specific option that Councillor Hopeta raised, I do have appetite for. I would have preferred if there would have been a few more guardrails in this particular recommendation to actually zoom in on some of these specific questions rather than leaving it quite wide open, which I'm less comfortable with. But acknowledging the Chief Executive's comment that effectively this is work in train already, and this is the second or third time we've sent the same direction, I'll probably continue to back it, but would just encourage us as elected members to reflect on when the direction's already been given and not necessarily needing to give it multiple times to achieve those same outcomes.
All right, back to you, Councillor.
Thank you. I did deliberately try and keep this resolution quite broad. You know, Councillor Harper had provided the example of road tolls, and that was certainly raised in workshops as an example of a new fee and charge that we could introduce. And my understanding from last week's questions was that it wasn't something that had been followed up at all. So there may well be other fees and charges that we are not aware of, that the Chief Executive might know about or find out about. So that's why I've left it deliberately broad. Once again, this is just information to come back, so it does not lock us into anything at this point. And I acknowledge that some of this information is already aiming to come back to us in March. In terms of the cost of living crisis, I certainly don't think that this is at all inconsistent with my views expressed on that. In fact, it aligns with that in terms of the fact that I think increasing fees and charges means that the cost sits with the user. It's basically increasing user pays, I guess. So those in our community who can't afford some things at the moment, without those additional fees and charges, might be being asked to subsidise those who can afford certain things, and there are choice. So, for example, our building services are not covering the costs at the moment for the costs that are incurred for those services. Those in our community who aren't building new homes are having to subsidise that. So I think it's really relevant for us to get a really good understanding of our options, and that's what this is seeking. So I'd really urge you to support it.
All right, we have the amendment there. We will, sorry, the extra resolution. Sorry, we will vote on that. Number 3. It has passed 13 votes for and 2 against. All right, we are through number 8. Well done. On to number 9, the long-term plan rating system, and page 25 of your substantive report, and I invite Steve Patterson, our strategy finance manager, up. Steve, welcome.
Yes, good morning, Mr Mayor and councillors. I don't propose to say a great deal about this report and basically take it as read, but there are a couple of very brief things I'd like to say. First, the report was prepared at the time when we thought that the rates increase was going to be 11.5%, and so the figures don't represent them being 11.7. In reality, that doesn't make a huge difference to the individual details about individual rates. It's about 50 cents or so additional rate increase for an individual ratepayer. But we will be updating the material to go to audit to reflect the position as to be consistent with what you've now got in the CD. The material is well consistent with what we presented to you back in December in terms of the approach that you chose at that time, and of course the only change, I suppose, in reality is that we've based the figures on the draft of the budget for the 24-25 year rather than the stuff being based on the 23-24 year that you previously saw. So the impact across the different groups of ratepayers is similar in terms of the numbers in each group, but just the sums are slightly different, of course, reflecting the slightly higher levels of rates that you've agreed to propose to the community.
it's a complex topic, difficult to describe to you and to the public in simple terms. Difficult for us at times, really, as well, to make sure that what we're testing for ourselves makes sense, is comprehensive, has understood the implications of each of the things that are being proposed. And I guess I find myself in these sorts of situations always sort of second guessing myself a little bit and double checking just to make sure that I am understanding what's here and what the effect is. But I do know that every time you look at something, you find something more, and that I guess that happens through the whole LTP process really, but particularly in this rating as well. And so one of the benefits, I suppose, from my perspective, of the council choosing the option it's chosen in terms of having a proportion of the rates based on the capital value in the way that it's decided at the moment is that it gives us an opportunity to become more familiar with the impacts and to see those things that we might not have quite foreseen, perhaps, despite the level of testing that we've done, and gives us an ability to be able to just reflect on those things as the as we learn a bit more about them. As you know, there are, I suppose, winners and losers when you change a system, different incidents across the community, and that's what you're seeking to do. You're trying to rebalance who's paying what, so that we have to accept that there will be people who are paying quite a lot more and some people who will be perhaps paying a bit less, but certainly less than they would have paid had we stuck with the present system. As you'll see, I think back in December we were suggesting that the targeted rate for the capital value would be one that would seek to fund most of the what you'd briefly call the Goal 1 ambitions of the council. That's the roading, economic development, some of the material to do with the public good part of planning and building services type activities that are all embraced in that activity. And I guess it's just that the sum that's sought for the budgets for those activities is similar to the sum that we would have, that 30% of the rate represents. So that's I guess a helpful thing that's happened in terms of just doing that. I think it's useful to say as well that those activities are ones that the capital value is perhaps a reasonable proxy for saying that there's a base there in terms of the level of investment in those activities that you could associate with the capital value, more than some others perhaps. And so I think that's a reasonable fit in terms of that targeted rate being for that purpose. I think that's probably about all I'd want to say at the moment. I'll just respond to questions.
Thanks, Steve. There's a number of questions in the queue. Just one from me at the start. The little chart that you've done there shows on number 5 and around the UAGC and targeted rates and just the different charge types. Rubbish and recycling, current charge of 103 will look to go down to 64. What's the driver for that?
Right through the budgetary process, one of the things we've found is that we've basically started from scratch in preparing the budgets, and so there are sometimes the material's been brought together in a slightly different way to what it has before, and there's been a bit of discussion at times about the overheads and the overhead allocations and things. So that's one of the things that's moved around a little bit, but the key thing that's impacting on this particular one is the assumptions around revenue that are being made within this activity. So they assume in the budget material that the policy in relation to rubbish, that is, that the cost of rubbish disposal is broadly covered from the sale of the refuse bags. And so that does mean increasing that charge as one of the things that will come to you in a couple of weeks' time when you consider those fees and charges. So that is built into that. If we didn't have the charge going up, the bag price going up, then we'd obviously have to increase the rates to fund that and to increase that charge back up, well, some way towards the level that it is this time. In addition to the bag charges, the staff in that area are proposing some increases in other types of revenue charges for some of the bulk green waste type activities and things, but that'll again come to you in the detail that's coming in the report that we're preparing at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Steve. My question was really it was asked by the Mayor really, which is just around that rubbish and recycling. Just in terms of when we're actually looking at an increase of 290 to 380 for rubbish bags, how did we actually think about that in the terms of a previous resolution, which meant we actually were trying to actually keep the rubbish bags at a similar price or at the same price previously?
Yes, we're conscious that you made that call last time, and that is an issue obviously that needs to be discussed by you in a couple of weeks' time when we look at the bag price again. And we'll be outlining how things are going this year in terms of the revenue relative to the decision you made about price, and then the projections for next year.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Steve. Questions around how much optionality we'll have after receiving submissions, and particularly in terms of things like differentials where we have not gone out with different scenarios.
It's going to be a judgment call at the time as to how materially different any decision that you would seek to make would be from what we communicated to the community. So I guess the judgment around that really revolves around if you're about to make a decision that would mean that the impact is going to be so materially different that the people who submitted previously didn't get a chance to submit, and I guess it's a test then about materiality as to how significantly different, then we'd be struggling to make a call to implement something that was materially different from what we'd said.
And are the way the differentials have been signaled here kind of seen as a simple consequence of the different land versus capital scenarios, and therefore if we're making decisions around, let's say, the proportions within that hybrid system, would those simply cascade into the differentials, or would there be kind of independent decisions around that?
The whole differential and what is the justification for a differential is something that isn't an exact science, and it's something, there's a political call really about things there in the end. And I guess one of the drivers that I engaged with you about before Christmas was, do we think that we're getting roughly the right sum from each group of ratepayers And of course, again, there's no particular right sum, but did it feel about right? And so the differentials that have been proposed here are designed to get roughly the same total contribution from each part of the community, each group of differential category as what we get at the moment. Having regard though for any challenges we might get about reasonableness in terms of the level of differential there are. So I think for the capital value, because in broad terms the average capital value for commercial properties is higher than for residential, you'd see that's part of the reason why the differential for commercial property is reduced for that capital value component. And by comparison, some of the more rural areas, the capital to land value ratio is quite low. So the differential, I suppose, discount that they currently have is proposed to be reduced a bit, that discount, so that they pay still a rate that might be deemed to be fair. But there are lots of judgment calls being made here, I have to say.
Thank you for that answer. I think that's clarified a few things. The graphs you present here and refer to and indicate an intent to incorporate them into supporting material. Will there be any further work on those graphs around legibility and interpretability?
I wasn't proposing that they be changed at the moment.
Will you be working with colleagues on that?
Well, could I just clarify? In terms of the supporting material, for the CD, I suppose in formal terms, is the part that's got the section, I suppose, that is from pages 32 through to 44 in the agenda. Well, at least on my printed copy of the agenda. I'm not sure what it shows on yours. That's the one that's under the rate system, rates, funding and rating impact statements. They're the formal part of the supporting information. Any other material that we would have that we decide that's appropriate to be used to engage with the public, we haven't seriously considered that just yet, and we'll be working on that next, I suppose, in terms of the things we need to do.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Steve. Just a couple of questions from me. In the option 2 hybrid option outlined on page 27, it talks about the capital value based targeted rate, and that it's connecting that to goal 1. I'm just wanting to understand, do we have to attach it to specific activity, the targeted rate, rather than just...
Yes. In the law, you can have just one general rate, and it has to be one or based on one or the other of those land or capital values, really. And so what we're describing to here is, yes, there has to be a targeted rate, and if there is a targeted rate, it has to describe what that targeted rate is to fund. And so what we've done it reasonably broadly, I suppose, but...
And why have we chosen goal 1 as...
goal 1, well, a couple of reasons. One was when we were looking for a sum of money that might be similar to the sum that would be the equivalent of 30% of what was the general rate. It was in that $30-something million worth of rates, and also in the past when we've talked about what activities it might be, you could make a case for having based on capital value. Transport in particular and economic development seem to me to be the types of activities that through the investment in those activities you are supporting growth, supporting development, perhaps related more to capital than land sometimes. But so there is, in principle, an argument for saying that's a reasonable match, and those are the reasons why we've chosen that.
Okay, thank you. And if the percentage of our investment into Goal 1 shifts to go up or down and doesn't align with the 30%, will that be an issue at all?
We will have to consider that each year to see. At the moment, there is some, the sum that's being sought is not the equivalent of the full cost of that Goal 1. There's a little bit of freeboard, a headroom there, but we'll have to just watch that in the future and see whether the description of what that targeted rate would be for needs to be broadened or changed in some way.
Okay. And just my second question was around the website tool where people can put in their property and see the different options. When will that go live?
At the time that the consultation starts.
Like 5th of April?
Well, we haven't sorted exactly yet. There's a lot of work going on trying to make that. It's not straightforward. It's got lots of complexities to it, and the staff are working really hard trying to first bring the material out of our databases, and built into this model are some quite significant changes in the way in which we describe stuff. So it's proving a real challenge actually to make it possible to do it. But by the time consultation starts, hopefully it will go.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Steve. I just had a question about the fact that we're consulting on our preferred option, but we're also describing status quo and a full capital value option.
Yes.
If the weight of submissions tends towards one of the alternatives rather than the preferred option, and council makes the decision to go with that, whatever that might be, are we still in a position to implement that on the 1st of July? I understand that if it were capital value, it has to be done over 3 years. I mean, how feasible is it for another one of those options to emerge as the preferred option as a result of submissions?
The land value option will be straightforward. We could make that happen tomorrow.
Yeah, that's just...
the capital value option is a little bit more difficult, but probably not too bad in that it'll be a year, probably, implementation. And my feeling is that the first year of that implementation would be more or less what we're saying is our option 2 anyway.
Okay. So this still is going out to consult on these 3 options. We genuinely have the option of going with whichever one emerges as the preferred option of the public.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Steve. All right, recommendation there that council agree the rating information contained in the memorandum for inclusion in the supporting material for the draft long-term plan 2024-34, and that this be provided to Audit New Zealand. I'm happy to move that. Second, the Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Steve. As you said, there was quite a lot of information there, and I understand a bit of midnight oil burn to get everything in place. Right. Comments. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge staff in the production of these supporting materials, because it isn't a lot of extra work that we've asked them to do, and it's complex work and has to be done accurately and within the bounds of what can be done legally. So I just want to start by acknowledging staff, and particularly Steve, for the work that's gone into it. And just to say that I'm very pleased that we are finally giving our residents the options of what they would like to see in terms of a rating system. You know, lots of us have expressed views, myself included, on what we think a fair rating system would be. But my aim in all of this has always been to give the public the option to say what they feel a fair rating system would be. And over the years, we've had, unfortunately, quite a lot of fluctuations in valuations based on land value, which has led to a lot of submissions on annual plans from residents requesting a capital value rating system. But it's one thing to request one, it's quite another perhaps to have it laid out in black and white in front of you as to what the implications would be. So I just want to state at this point, I am fully happy that we're going out with the status quo, the hybrid, and also explaining to people what the options would be for full capital. And I'm quite happy to go with whatever emerges as the preferred option of the community, should one emerge. All I've ever really wanted is the chance for us to review how we rate people and for people to have the option to say what they think will be the fairest system. So I'm very happy that we've got to this point, and I do hope and expect that we'll get a large number of submissions. And I would encourage people not only to look at what their own rates would be, but what in the bigger picture they think would be a fair system. Because it's not just about whether you as an individual will pay more or less, it's also about what's a fair assessment for the whole community. So I'm looking forward to seeing the submissions, and I hope there'll be very many of them.
All right, councillors. I'll just finish off with a comment. There's no other comments. Actually, our revaluations, for those that go back a little bit longer here, have actually been quite static. And it's only the last one, especially, that has caused the ripples, where our land values went up significantly. And some may say probably a bit of a catch-up on the rest of New Zealand. Palmerston North's always been a very, very, I suppose, a valued city that doesn't go up significantly, but it doesn't drop either. And it was just in the last two valuations, it went up slightly in the first one 6 years ago, and 3 years ago it went up significantly, and that did cause some angst. We haven't had a lot of calls, and certainly since I've been around this table, of beating of the drums of changing it. So I'm interested in to hear what the public think as well. It'll be interesting to see what our revaluations do in the coming year and a half when they're due. And the word on the street already is it's looking like we'll be going down. So we might have hit the top of the market when it was done last time. But look, let's see what the public say. I'm sure they will. Rates always get people going, and I'm sure we will get plenty of comments from all parties, residential, commercial, industrial, and our rural community as well. So can we vote, please? Has passed 14 votes for and none against. Right, moving through to number 10, and again invite our strategy finance manager, Steve Patterson, back. This is around the rates remission and postponement policies, page 61 of your papers, councillors.
Again, councillors, I don't have a great deal to say about this particular one, but just a couple of brief introductory comments. We've had a rates remission policy in place, this particular one, for the last nearly 6 years, and there is a requirement in the legislation to review that every 6 years at least. As you've seen from the policy, there are lots of elements to it, remissions for various things. The ones that we have the most, one or two are a bit administrative, things like penalties and the like, which is an important tool for the council staff to be able to work with. The other ones that are bigger as well revolve around the way schools are charged for their wastewater, and there was once upon a time some specific legislation about that that's now been withdrawn, but many councils have still retained the type of policy that we've got to moderate the charge to schools. And then the broad one is about the sort of community and sporting and arts type organisations, where in the legislation there is an ability to be able to give some review. And we have a group of people, organisations that are applying to us, and that from my personal perspective, I think the framework that we have in place for that seems to have been working quite well in recent years. And so that's the reason I'm not really proposing any significant change, or any change really, to that element of the policy. You will see I have reflected on whether or not we should have a policy of some sort to do with the changes that are coming to the rating system. And last time I spoke to you about this, I said that that was going to be, I thought, quite difficult. And I still think that's the case. But here have provided what I think is a reasonable approach, where we could consider hardship in particular circumstances. It won't necessarily be easy to administer, but I think it does give a framework and a backstop if we do have some issues that need to be addressed through the year as a result of the changes that are being proposed. So these are my recommendations to you.
Thanks, Steve. A number of questions. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Steve, for the report. And my question is just about that financial hardship, item 11. Noting that you've gone, there's a category that said the following grounds can be taken into account, so not must, but can. And the final bullet point there is that the ratepayer's sole income is from a central government benefit. I just wanted to explore why we've targeted that when these are questions of affordability, which may equally apply to people of low income. Do you feel like that gives a message that people will think this is just for people on a benefit, when that's not my read of it?
As you know, it's really, really difficult to know sometimes just quite what a person's financial circumstances are, and this is designed to be something that's a really last point of call type thing. So I wouldn't expect that there would be very many at all that we would expect to qualify, sort of a really last resort type situation in my mind. So whether we've described that adequately or not, I'm not sure, but that's the way we've done it.
Would it make any material difference if we didn't have that final bullet point? That if we left it just that the conditions that can be taken into account about personal circumstances and affordability, if financial funds, that's sufficient funds left over after. What does that last bullet point add?
Yeah, I guess as you mentioned there, we do have the can, which
Yes.
means that we're just looking at that as one of the things that we're taking into account.
But it would come within the preceding bullet point of sufficient funds.
It probably doesn't make a huge difference in reality as to whether we have it there or not.
Okay. I think I'd feel more comfortable if we didn't have that, and I'll probably signal I'll look for a seconder for that motion.
Well, do we need, we can just ask the officers to do that. Do we need a motion to do that?
If there's a general feeling that it should be removed.
How do we know there's a general feeling we'll have to vote?
I'm looking at officers
I'll put a motion up.
Through the chair, if there was a desire around the table to not have that bullet point in there, I think that we could look to exclude that.
All right, thank you. Nothing else, Councillor?
No, those are my questions, and delighted if we can exclude that, and I'll probably speak to it in comments.
Yeah. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Bowen has actually beat me to it. I was really looking forward to teasing that out and understanding what that meant. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. Further to the financial hardship area, so if an application is granted here, does council revenue decrease, or do other sources of revenue go up to keep a net zero?
Well, if we do give a remission, it means that the council's revenue is lower than it otherwise would be. We assume each year that there will be a certain level of remissions that the council gives, but that's broadly consistent with the level of sum that we've approved each year. So there isn't the fact that we give remissions means that each year we have to build that into the budget to assume that to rate others to fund that.
So, and what is the assumed amount associated with policy 11, the financial hardships?
At the moment, we haven't got any specific additional sum that we've assumed in the budget over and above what we've currently got for the past years, because it's only just a very late, I guess, addition. But we haven't specifically budgeted a sum. From my perspective, I would expect that the sum, if there is any, would be very small in this coming year. We just have to cope with that during the course of the year.
And when will council get any information about adjustments to that sum?
How do you mean adjustments to the sum? I'm not proposing that in the way we do the calculations that we'll make any adjustment.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. So then, beyond what assumptions we make, what's the actual maximum financial exposure that this creates for the council?
The maximum exposure, did you say? Yeah, haven't tried to calculate that. As I'm saying, as I've said, I feel that this would be a very last point of call, and that you'd have a very small number of people who might in the end qualify for it. But if that proved not to be the case, obviously we'd be having to come back and interact with the council to find a way through.
Thanks. I guess that's kind of where I'm trying to get to then, is in terms of understanding the potential merits of going out with a policy without kind of an upper cap on exposure, and kind of dealing with it case by case versus actually having the conversation up front about what our appetite is for exposure before we potentially get in a situation of facing that exposure.
I guess from my, it's one of the reasons why I guess I was giving a signal to you back before Christmas that that I felt that it was going to be really difficult to have a policy such as this, especially one that might actually be broader than this, that would cover a much greater exposure. So this one's not suggesting any particular right to a remission to anyone, and it's focused on hardship, as opposed to someone saying if they had over a certain percentage increase or a certain dollar sum increase that they'd automatically get a remission. So this is not targeted in that way. So it means it's just about impossible to judge what the level of exposure is. As I said, I'd expect to be relatively a very small number, handful at the most. And so if that were the case, then the sum would be very small. If we're saying that the amount of the remission would be 50%, maximum of 50% of the difference between what their rates increase by and what they...
Thanks for those responses. Finally, my read of the paper on recall is indicated that the financial hardship was really targeted around the residential members of the community. I was just wondering, is that sufficiently reflected in the drafting, or could there be some reflection on whether it's sufficiently reflected in the drafting?
Certainly my expectation was that this would only apply to residential people, that you wouldn't be in a position to actually be able to give remissions to commercial businesses as a result of this policy.
Probably a little bit like Councillor Bowen then. I mean, does this need to be made explicit from the table, or because I don't see it explicit in there?
The CE's just indicated it's noted.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
So, just teasing out where Councillor Barrett was going, and I think I know where he was going. Steve, we have a collection rate of what, 99.9%, don't we?
90.
So our exposure is extremely small, and in the past, how many times has any residential hardship been actioned?
We don't have any active remissions given for that type of purpose, or any active postponements in place.
Okay. And that's out of what, 40,000 ratepayers?
30-something thousand ratepayers, yes. We've never had any postponements the last 40 years.
Yeah.
And
Okay, thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Steve. Just looking at the section 11 on page 72 of our papers, it's made explicit that this relates only applies to where there's been significant changes to the rating system, and then the next paragraph says that it doesn't include changes to general rates. When we're doing both at the same time, if we progress a rating system change, obviously as well as a potential 11-point-something% increase in year one, how will we determine whether that hardship is caused by the rates, the change to the rating system, as opposed to just general rates increases?
by looking at what the rates would have been in a previous system for the new increase, and comparing it with what it would be under the new system. And then the result of the two would be the story. So it's not hardship caused by the system, if it's or by the increase itself. If it's not that, then that calculation will demonstrate that.
So their increase would need to be more than the 11.7%?
It would need to be more, well, yes. It would need to be more than what the present system would have had their increase at. So if we do the calculation based on a land value based system, but based on the latest figures, with the 11.5% in, and then compare that with what they've been charged, and then look at so that's what that policy is designed to do.
Okay, so
it's not dealing with situations where we're putting the rates up 11 or 12 or 15 or 20% as a result of revaluations or anything like that.
So if part of the driver for considering a rates change is to better reflect people's ability to pay, and if people in the current system have potentially experienced hardship because of the current rating system, but they don't meet that threshold of showing that their hardship is due to the rating system change, could that be seen as an inconsistency in terms of who we're helping and who we're not through this policy?
Well, I guess. I mean, we have a rates postponement policy for severe hardship at the moment, and as I said, our focus when we have staff working on dealing with customers is to help them through, do budgeting, do all sorts of things that help them through to make sure that they can meet those obligations, and we have great success at that, I'd have to say, in the end. So it hasn't been a problem. Well, it's always a problem for people to pay their rates, obviously, but it hasn't been a problem that's risen to the level that's one that's caused us a problem at the policy level. And so I don't see it as being a problem. It's just that the risk is with a change to the system like being proposed, there could be some extraordinary level of change to the amount of rates that people are having to face that's over and above what they would normally be budgeting to do, even in a situation where we're putting the rates up quite a bit.
Thank you. Just the other question is, how long would someone be eligible for this? Is it just for one? Do they just apply for 1 year, or can it be rolled over to future years?
It's just meant to be for the year concerned.
Okay. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Kia ora, Your Worship. Just a question, Steve. Thank you. With regards to on page 74, And number 14 on the actual document, I think it's page 11, with rates, remission and postponement policy for Māori freehold land. You mentioned that the council will not provide any remissions or postponements under this policy except for one rating unit, which is normally a small island surrounded by the Manawatu River. Do we know how much Māori freehold land is in Palmerston North?
From what my understanding, that's the only parcel of land that's described as Maori freehold land in that sense in the city.
Whoa, that's sad, isn't it? I was going to go further, but I don't think I can. Thank you.
Right, thank you, councillors, Deputy Mayor councillors. We have a recommendation on the table there that council adopt for consultation the draft rates, remission and payment policy attachment 1. I'm happy to move it. I have a seconder. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Steve, for pulling this together. Those that have been involved in this, and some of you have through your roles around rates, remission, know that the policy and the bars and the thresholds are quite high, and there's quite a lot of substance to it. We have a very good, and I think Steve said, quite a proven track record on collection, but with the community in mind and helping people through. And I know of even friends that have been helped through in a really considerate and I suppose compassionate way of making sure that they can get through that little hump that may have appeared for them around rates. Our collection rate's 99.99% or something along those lines. That is not the same around us. It's considerably different, actually. So it is something that we're quite different to some of our neighbours and colleagues further afield. So it's hats off to the staff for the way they manage that. This piece of policy just gives us some understanding on how we can potentially help people. The number of people around that new number 11 is possibly may not get enacted, or if it does, it's a very, very small amount of single figure perhaps applications. So I'm quite comfortable with it at this stage to see it go out for consultation, and again I suppose our community will tell us what they think. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, really pleased to put this one out with all of our consultation documents. I am interested to hear if the community think we've got this right, and I think it's important to recognise, and I think this came in a discussion last week, that when people read these documents to see if they're eligible, they see themselves in it and not barriers to eligibility, which was my point about removing the criteria about the ratepayer, their sole form of income being a central government benefit. Then we want to recognise that family units come in all shapes and sizes these days. There's huge diversity out there, and financial hardship is not limited just to people who are on benefits. So we want to open that as wide as possible so that people see themselves in the description and can apply to see if that is suitable for them. Recognising that we have a couple of policies there that might apply to people, the financial hardship kind of general that we've always done for rates postponement, and then this new remission for hardship caused by restructuring of our own rating system. So yeah, really pleased to support this recommendation today.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also really happy to support this. But I am really mindful that those who may experience financial hardship going forward in our community, there might be a combination of things that impact on that. Not only the rating system changes, but also the level of increase in rates that's being proposed, and the definitions in the policy around if the ratepayer is unlikely to have sufficient funds left over after payment of rates for normal health care, proper provision for their home, etc. There may well be people in our community who fall into this category or move into this category as a result of rates increases who aren't eligible for this. And I'm not proposing that we broaden it because I think that would not be feasible and not be, you know, it would be a huge, probably a huge cost and a huge administrative effort. But even this week at the Disability Reference Group meeting, I had questions from members saying, with the rates increase, will there be some sort of fund that people can apply to if they can't afford to pay their rates, or are they going to be forced out of their homes? And that is a real concern for some of our communities. So I just wanted to flag that, because whilst it's targeted at the hardship as a result of changes to the rating system, the mere fact that our current system is acknowledged as perhaps being not entirely fair or not entirely targeted towards being addressing people's ability to pay, and that's why we're looking at the different rating system. I just really wanted to flag that as being a concern, and it's not a concern that I've got an answer to at this point being able to solve, but just wanted to really flag it, that it may feel to some that there's an inconsistency there about who can apply. And yes, I'll look forward to hearing the outcome of the consultation, but just wanted to flag that as a little bit of a concern to me.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just to draw to the members' attention that there is already in the policy a rates postponement policy for cases of extreme financial circumstances. So if there are people who are in danger of losing their properties because of an increase in rates, they could already apply under that clause and be considered for rates postponement. So I think that the safeguards that the member was talking about are already there, already in our policy, and no change to those is proposed. So I don't think there's anybody missing out because of extreme financial hardship. So the extra clause is around hardship due to the rating system changing, but there's been a long-standing clause around postponement policy for case of extreme financial hardship, and that hasn't changed.
Thank you, councillors. Also, it's worth noting the previous government did raise the low income rates remission, the threshold, and it's still not enough, to be really honest. But at least it was raised, and although that's a little bit of help, that should be sort of put into the memory banks as well. But yeah, I think, look, this is a good start, and we'll just see where the public go with it. But I think as a council, we're probably seeing this pretty fair and reasonable about postponements, rates remissions, and I'm hoping that that probably comes through in submissions as well. All right, can we vote, please? That has passed, 14 votes for and thank you. All right, we've into lunch, so we will adjourn till 1:20. See you back in the chamber then. To those online, an hour's time. Thank you.